Well, the FARC came into being officially, I think, in 1964, but you can trace their roots before that. There was a big civil war in the 1950s, and a lot of the members of the FARC started out in kind of local self-defense groups. And then in the early 60s, they sort of coalesced into kind of a more systematic fighting force, kind of fused with the Communist Party. They started really expanding in the 1980s in terms of kind of controlling territory. The FARC started a political party which was massacred, essentially. Thousands of presidential candidates, thousands of activists, members were murdered by the army, by paramilitary groups. The negotiation with the government in the 1980s was, what they call many forms of struggle, the simultaneous use of many forms of struggle. You fight, you negotiate, you contest elections, you get social groups organized, you do strikes, you do everything. So then they retreated to a much more militarized strategy. They raised money by terrorizing people, by kidnapping people, by taxing people. If you were in rural Colombia, you paid what they called the vacuna, the vaccination. You had to vaccinate yourself from being kidnapped. So when President Uribe came to power in the early 2000s, he enormously intensified the military struggle against the FARC and the High Commissioner for Peace. He understood very well that the politics of Colombia would never allow this military strategy to be sustainable and that you had to start negotiating. He understood that if this was going to be successful, you had to just focus on the key things that they really cared about and strip away all the other stuff. He got me to read every single policy announcement by the FARC since like 1964 when they started to try to figure out what did they really care about and what did they sort of do because the Cubans told them they should do it or the Soviets told them they should, like what could you take off the table? So we used to go and sit in this restaurant and go through okay, yeah, look, that only appeared in 1977. They really can't care about that. But if you go back to 64, here's the stuff, they really care about. It's a very Colombian revolution. There's no socialist agenda to socialize stuff. It's about giving it to poor people. We can talk about land reform, we can talk about land restitution. There's just much more room for negotiation about stuff like that than there is about nationalizing the land. And the process was slow, it was methodical, but that was the genius of the whole thing. So by the time that the plebiscite happened, there was no going back. The first thing the FARC announced was, no, we're committed to peace. And, you could sort of say, well, I've got a lot of nonsense, but actually they were. You can't just, after you've been telling people like that for 5 years, you can't say, okay, forget that, I didn't really mean that, let's start fighting again. No, I think they were too far down the road. What's the agreement about? There's several key plinths. There's this issue of rural development. There's a political component. That's both kind of very FARC specific. They have mandated representation in the Congress, in the Senate, and, so there are these special areas in the country which are going to get extra representation, which, everybody interprets as, the FARC get to elect people. There's a lot of drug eradication elements. So the FARC have to tell the truth. They have to tell the truth about their crimes. And the idea is that if they confess and tell the truth, then they can basically get away with some sort of community service, or they don't have to go to jail. And so that's very similar to the process that they had with the paramilitaries. And then the last bit is just about the logistics of demobilization and disarmament and things like that. That's where they're going to start trying to prepare the FARC for civilian life. Part of the demobilization involves financial compensation, but also attempts to reintegrate people, start trying to help them develop skills, and how do we get them jobs, how do we reintegrate them into society.